welcome everyone to this week's episode of Postmodern Politics on the War Boys Network. I am your host, Jacob Engels. This week we have a phenomenal guest, Marcy the Conqueror. She is joining us to talk about some issues that I think we might be able to find some middle ground on, or at least have a nice civil discussion. I know our audience that's watching is probably leaning a lot more to one side on this issue. But what we like to do on this program is allow an open dialogue between all points of views, because that's what's wrong with America is when we don't talk to each other, things get lost and we lose each other. We don't see each other as human beings, and that's what we're striving to do on this program. Sometimes I'm kind of off the walls on my own thoughts and processes, but it's my show, so we're gonna have fun anyways. And Marcy's gonna have her time to shine. And so, I just want to start off with, before we get into what you feel on some of these issues that affect the LGBT
Mhm.
community, since you are an LGBTQ activist, I wanted you to just describe a little bit about yourself, your activism, and give us a couple of issues that you see as important for elected officials in the United States to be focusing on over the next year.
So I'm Marcy Rheintgen. I obviously got famous with my political activism against the bathroom bill. I was the first person to be arrested under the bathroom laws in America. And what I did is essentially I wrote like 160 letters to every like lawmaker in the state of Florida. Not like congressional lawmaker and like for like DC, but like sort of state lawmakers in Florida. Just saying I was gonna break the law, and then um, they got the police there and they arrested me. I spent a night in jail and could face 11 months. And honestly, the big political issues to me are just sort of like keeping trans healthcare and stuff like that. And I do want a middle ground. I want it to be fair for everyone. I want, you know, I see a lot of, I see a lot of sort of changes in how the political culture has operated lately, and it's been sort of negative changes. I've seen an incline of you know a lot of like anti-Semitism and stuff like that, and that really bothers me. I've I've seen a lot of like open like that kid who killed themselves and they posted on Twitter and like people were mocking it. Like that's not good. I want politics to have heart to it. I want our politicians to treat each other with kindness, and I want everyone in the polity to treat each other with kindness. And so my philosophy is dignity, and I want to go back to a world of politics was kinder and when we would treat each other with dignity. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that right off the bat, first question, we can all agree with. Our politics right now is very divisive and very aggro. And I think that comes from a point of frustration on both sides that doesn't have to do with all of us as Americans, but more are upset at how politicians for decades have focused really on themselves and their own self-enrichment and not on us as human beings. And I think we're, you know, a lot of times kind of playing into their game where we're mad at each other instead of being mad at them and saying, hey, I want low taxes. I want maximum freedom. I want to just be left to live my life and do what I want to do and not, be infringed upon from the left or right. Um, and you talked about the bathroom bill in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is is there any part of you that maybe, because I'm gay, and I
Mm-hmm.
will say, I've been working in politics since I was 15. The
Wow.
the older Republican Party, the kind of Bush era neocon religious right era of the Republican Party was a lot more difficult for me to be, um, I would say, out
Mm-hmm.
and be able to acknowledge, hey, I'm gay. And even though I'm a strict Roman Catholic, and
Me too.
there we go, and on 99% of the issues, I'm with. Um, I think a lot of the right leaning policies, but I've kind of noticed with Trump, there's kind of a double-edged sword here. He was the first candidate ever to hold up in Colorado during the 2016 campaign. He held up the gay pride flag, and he, as a businessman, gave a famous interview to Out Magazine when Hillary Clinton was running for Senate in New York, where they asked him about her stance on gay marriage, and back then she was very much against gay marriage, and he said,
Mm-hmm.
"I don't care who you love, who you're dating. If you work for me, I care about, are you getting the job done and everything else like that." But then there's also another part of kind of this new right movement that is very uh, anti-gay, and
Mm-hmm.
so do you think it's a point of we're just not sitting down and having discussions and realizing we're human beings and having
Yeah.
these talks?
Well, I I feel like Trump's such an interesting character, because Trump would have like, yeah, you were right, you're right. He would hold up the LGBT flag. He did have like trans people at his pageants. I do think that a lot of the homophobia that you see on the right now, it's not motivated by the same religious fundamentalism. It's sort of almost performative, I feel like, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it seems super weird, because it's like, because I feel like, yeah, I don't know, it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't, I'm very young, so I have a lot less political experience than you, and like, you know but that being said, what I do know, of how like religious like from the religious like homophobic people I know in real life, it was horrible, but it seems like the people who are like homophobic, who are irreligious, seem like weirder about it, and they seem to be
Yeah.
like sort of like way more mean spirited about it. If like because they
Well,
just make it about like they just like call gay people like people who like butt sex or whatever, and they say stuff like that.
well, it's you make an interesting point because Trump did appoint Rick Grinnell in his first term, openly gay man, to be ambassador to the UN, and that was at that point before Pete Buttigieg, the highest openly gay person to be appointed a cabinet position. But and Ben can speak to this. I still even get crap in person and online from the kind of like Nick Fuentes
Oh
wing of
God.
the
Yeah.
movement. And it's kind of funny to me because you know whenever I get in these arguments with them online, I say, well, that's okay how you feel about me, and all right, whatever. And then I say, well, what have you done politically or in activism aside from scream nasty cringe things to get attention in person or on Twitter or X or wherever? And it always goes back to, oh, you need to repent for your sins. And it's like, excuse me,
Right.
I was raised Roman Catholic. I'm
Hmm.
aware that according, you know, to the Bible and to the religious doctrine, that is one of my sins and it's my cross to bear. So I don't need you to be telling me that. I'm already aware.
Hmm.
But you're right, they get really nasty about this stuff. And then when you come back with kind of logic and say, hey, well, tell me about this, that, or the other, they just revert back to name calling. And
Yeah.
that's just to me the sign of a weak mind. When it's have a debate with me and say, Jacob, you're wrong about this, you're wrong about that. Marcy, you're wrong about this, you're wrong about
Hmm.
that, and here's why, and here's my kind of like footnotes for my essay that I'm writing about why I'm right, you're wrong. They say, "Oh, you're horrible. Shut up, fag. Shut up, tranny." They just go
Mm-hmm.
immediately to
Yeah.
that, and that's a weak person. Let me. I'm gonna ask the next question. This is actually we're doing really good right now. Um, so outside of issues like the bathroom bill, or maybe the bill about curriculum in school that has become known as the "Don't Say Gay" bill. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what what are other issues that you think are really important to the LGBT community? Because for me, it's like I care about my taxes being low. I care about not getting involved in foreign wars. I want to have,
Yeah, no,
you
I don't want to
know,
bomb random children in the Middle East too. I agree with you.
there we go. I want to own my guns. If I want to have a chicken farm in my front yard,
Mm-hmm.
just leave me the hell alone. And
Mm-hmm.
and and that's so. Is that kind of where you're, or what are issues? I guess instead of bringing it about me, what are, let's say, three issues that you think are just as important as these kind of cultural issues for the LGBT community?
Just as important that I think are just as important as the like just as important for the LGBT community.
Yeah, yeah. Aside from like the medical care or some of these laws about
Okay, so
content
like
schools.
outside of just normal trans or
Yeah,
gay issues. Okay, yeah, I would say because I guess these would just be generally important. I think bioethics, and this is probably gonna come out of left field, but I actually think bioethics are really really important and stuff people are sleeping on. I get really queasy when I see all these people talking about, you know, you know, these people. There's a lot of people who are talking about using IVF to determine like sort of like qualities about the child, and then that sort of becomes like designer babies, eugenics, where you're like picking like the sex, you're picking like the color of your baby, you're picking all these things, and like that stuff makes me feel like really like mm,
well,
um
that's oh my God, that's such a great point because I hate that too. Um, because now it's somehow become normalized and kind of in vogue, but 15, 20 years ago, we would be like, okay, Dr. Mengele, are we back in 1933 Germany where we're doing medical experiments and trying to determine, I want my baby to have this color eyes, this kind of hair, this kind of physiological build? Um, I think that fundamentally is not something we should be getting involved in, because where does that stop?
yeah.
Then do we start determining, like we've seen a lot of these movies um, or books that talk about people being designed for certain purposes, where you don't get the right to choose if you want to be a carpenter or a doctor. You're genetically engineered from the moment of the idea that you're supposed to be born to fulfill a certain role, and that's kind of dystopian to me.
Well,
Oh
and I'm
yeah.
willing to, sorry to interrupt, but I'm willing to bet too that most of the Groypers or the Nick Fuentes audience was not ready for Marcy's stance on that. That's amazing.
All right, we got one issue down. Give me two more.
um hmm. I actually think the public place of sex and social life, I think, actually, you know, contrary to popular belief, people are having less sex than ever. Like Gen Z is just having almost zero sex. And that's because like the way I guess it's not just about sex, it's sort of about relationships in general. I think, the way that relationships have become is sort of commoditized with these apps. And I also think, you know, I think a lot of people are told that, like, I think hookup culture has sort of made a lot of women, feel like sort of objectified. And, I'm sure it's been great for a lot of guys, but I mean, has it really? Because I think it really does sort of break down, you know, I know it's like, I know people always sort of don't take me seriously in certain respects, you know, as a religious person who's like saving myself for marriage, but also like very, very, very LGBT. But I do take that sort of stuff seriously. And I do think that, in a culture where, fornication is sort of normal, we do sort of get people devaluing each other's relationships, because I think a lot of people sort of tend to objectify each other when the ultimate end for dating used to be, discerning for marriage. But now people, when they date, a lot of times they like treat their girlfriend or boyfriend sort of like a marriage, and they say, people even jokingly call each other their husbands and wives. And I think, that's sort of like a joke, but it's really kind of not a joke, because I think that's how a lot of people treat each other. And then, when they have these breakups, which are essentially divorces because they're living together and they're having a deeply ingrained life together, of course people are going to be really upset, and, they're told to just get over it. And that makes people numb to a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Well, and I that's a good point because I've kind of seen that. I would say, geez, I'm gonna kind of date myself here, but I was in high school from 2006 to 2009. So really, the only app or hookup culture back then would have been Craigslist or Backpage, and you would only go on there if you're basically like prostituting or going to a glory hole. So you know,
The
the, you
pre-grinder days.
the pre-grinder days, you still had to have like that initial intimacy, not from a sexual standpoint, but from an emotional, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, where you were setting yourself up to not just be with somebody from a transactional sexual perspective. And I think you hit the nail on the head where right now we're living in this culture where you're basically doing everything that a married couple would do, but the intimacy when it comes to going on dates or having hobbies together or things like that take up about 10% of the relationship, and 90% of it is a transactional sexual um, interaction. And that's why I think, correct me if I'm wrong, breakups now are so just clinical and nasty and mean, because it's like, oh, screw you. I can just hop on Sniffies or Blender or Tinder or Grinder and have somebody here in 30 minutes to do whatever things I want to do. And then it, I feel like that kind of has taken part of our soul
Yeah.
away. So this is just I'm having a lot of fun. This is interesting. Ben,
Great.
would
Yeah.
would you agree though? Like this is no lie. Do we ever get back to a culture where you go to a bar or you go out somewhere or you see somebody in the supermarket, you strike up a conversation and it's like, "Wow, okay, here's my number. I'm going to ask
Mhm.
you on a date." I don't see how we get back there.
Right. I mean, I'm at that point now, but I've been pushed to that point. Like I try to live in the real world and limit my digital use on the apps, on the phones. But I love what you're saying here. I couldn't agree more. How do we get back to this? Do we get back to this? Can we?
Yeah.
Well, and
Well,
like like you can even see it, especially in the LGBT community, of like, you know, like obviously in gay bars, but especially lesbian bars, because lesbians, generally go out less, so they're the first ones to kind of go. Like I think like 90% of lesbian bars are now gone. Like there's not even a lesbian bar. There used to be like 11 lesbian bars in Florida, and now there are zero as of like last year, which is
yeah.
crazy. You
I
know.
mean, the only one I can think of in Orlando that could potentially be considered somewhat of a lesbian bar might be Barcodes or Southern Nights. and that's really not.
Yeah, Southern Nights is like everybody, but that's kind of how,
Yeah.
like, that's been my experience. I got into the culture a little bit later than you, Jacob, and my experience is it was always just a big hodgepodge. There was never really any dedicated area. It was like everyone show up to these bars in Orlando, like St. Matt's, Parliament House, Southern
Yep.
Nights, and it's never really been like, not subgenred out like the way you said. Like I never could remember like a lesbian bar or anything like that. It's always been a hodgepodge, a melting pot.
Well, and that's one thing I will say that I kind of fundamentally disagree with um a lot of the discussion around LGBT in the right wing. You know, if LGBTQ community wants to have certain spaces where they feel comfortable, they want to express themselves in a certain way. I mean, I'm pretty much a libertarian at heart. Like, go for it. Don't care. Like, leave it be. Just like if somebody wants to have an Irish bar and they want to hang out with their Irish friends, that's their prerogative. You want to go, you can go. You don't want to go, leave it alone. Um, but one thing before I move on to a couple more questions is what Marcy brought up about porn. Um, that it's interesting because dating back, I mean, you look at, we'll just give one good example since we're in Florida. Ted Bundy, um, amongst many other serial killers, talked about how porn desensitized them sexually to the point where the craving that they had became so extreme that it then transferred into, rape and mutilation and murder. And a lot of people say, well, that's what these people say when they're on death row and they want to blame porn and anyone but themselves. But a lot of studies have shown that, obviously not everybody becomes a serial killer because they watch porn, but in terms of how they interact with people, behaviorally, emotionally, sexually, in their relationships, it kind of creates this facade of what people expect a relationship to be. And when that doesn't happen, um, people act out in certain ways. Oh, if you go out with somebody and you don't bone on the first date, then that person must be a bitch or a bastard and blah, 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 blah. And that can lead to stalking, that can lead to harassment, that can lead to domestic abuse and a lot of nastiness. I think one thing I agree with wholeheartedly is um, I do want people to be free to do what they want, but the access to porn as it has been up until now in Florida and most of the country, where you can be at a developmental age when you haven't even had a sexual relation yet, or even know what that means for you to be engaged with somebody on that level. I kind of like the idea that now you got to kind of upload your ID and prove you're 18 at
Mhm.
the very least before you can just fall into that world. Because if you look at incel culture, for example, I think a lot of what drives these incel people is through pornography. They have been taught that that's how it happens. I like this person. I say something nice. We go have a romp in the car or in the alleyway because that's what I saw on porn. And then if they don't do that, then I'm rejected. Society hates me. Nobody wants me. And then they do horrible things. Um, it's just it's being a human is tough enough without adding all this kind of stuff into it. Let's go on to the next question.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's the thing. I to go back to what you said, like at the start of it, it's like, everything a lot with a lot of drugs, people always chase bigger thrills. I have a lot of great friends who are drug users, and people don't just stay on weed, they go to cocaine. In
yep.
the same way with obviously no judgment. They're still pretty great. They're pretty function. I know a lot of very functional drug users, which is super fascinating. But
Yeah, we
you,
did too.
yeah, it's super interesting. But so the same thing, people will always seek more and more sexual thrills to get a bigger high, because then you sort of get numb to stuff, and that's how people have all these like weird fetishes where they're like getting like slapped by a guy in a horse mask while licking the feet. It's like they
Right.
ran out of shit.
When I heard horse come out of your mouth, I was like, please do not mention Mr. Hands. I do not want to talk about that.
That
For
that might
those
be
who don't,
before her time. Yeah,
for
Wait,
that's
who's Mr.
for
Hands?
Miss
uh,
Well, if you so choose to Google that and find out, I am sorry for corrupting you just slightly. It's probably something you shouldn't look into, but it speaks to what you just said about people chasing thrills.
Mhm.
Let's just say man, horse, death. Uh, that's that's pretty much all you need to know. Please don't Google it.
yeah,
So
sad story.
it's a sad story, but and that happened in the '90s, so that shows you how much we've been going kind of down the rabbit hole with this kind of stuff. So next question, um, and I've kind of experienced this a lot over the years, since 2016 in particular. Um, there's a growing number of LGBT, even Q, IA plus, um, people who are supportive or prominent in the MAGA or America First movement or support Trump. Um, how do you, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you make sense of that?
Okay, so you know, being a conservative and liking Edmund Burke's philosophy isn't inherently, sort of incompatible with homosexuality. But I actually think in terms of political leadership, there are more gay people on the right than the left, and I think it's because of like the psychological thing of like, so a lot of a lot of gay people and transgender women, when they're in the closet, they do stuff to overcompensate because they feel insecure about their masculinity. Sometimes they feel insecure about, not being heterosexual. And sometimes they do things and they make themselves intentionally straight coded to sort of overcompensate for it. And then after they sort of come out and they sort of deal with that, you know, a lot of those features, they actually say, actually, I kind of like this. I kind of like this about me, and so they sort of keep those things about themselves. And I wonder, and I've always thought this, if the psychological bias of overcompensating initially, but then later sort of saying, hey, I actually like being a conservative, is why there's a lot of gay people and conservatives. I know this is like a weird thing to bring up and like a weird way to talk about it. And I hope I'm not being disrespectful, but I mean, I think it's not untrue for some people.
No, I'll give you a great example to what you just said. In 2008, we had in Florida the Yes on Two campaign, and that was the campaign to put into state law to ban gay marriage. And at that point, I was still in high school. I mean, I had girlfriends, going to homecoming, prom, whatever. But I knew deep down what I
Yeah.
liked, but I also kind of had to struggle with, in that time period, it was really unacceptable in the Republican Party. So, who's the first one that's out there putting up yard signs and leading protests to ban gay marriage? It was me. And, that, I think at that young age, that was me maybe overcompensating or kind of putting a shield on myself to say, hey, don't look at me. And but at the core of it, I think you're right. Maybe some people come to the realization once they're kind of in the movement that they support a lot of those things. I think before um, that kind of stuff came up for me, I was already there, so it's a little different for me. But I think you're absolutely right because we have a whole host of uh, preachers, pastors, right wing people who've been busted um, doing drugs,
In
having
the bathhouses.
in the bathhouses, and that's I think that's just a human condition is hypocrisy. Everyone is subject to that sometimes. But
The great Norm Macdonald bit about that.
yes. But I think now, at least for me, from what I've experienced with, the post, after Trump in 2016 and during the campaign, it's been a lot more acceptable
Mm-hmm.
to be gay in the right wing. Um, and I hope that continues to be the fact. Libertarians, uh, what they have, we've seen this funny shirt so many times, Ben. What do they say? Liberty, gun, beers, and titties. Uh, you know, that's what they
LGBT.
care about, and everything else is just like, leave me the hell alone. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, like right now, and this was years ago. Like I think the first one in Orange County, actually in the nation. I went to the school board meeting in Orange County and I read aloud the book, some segments from the book Gender Queer, and it just, to me, some of the things I was reading in that and seeing in that,
Yeah.
I was like, man, if you want to read that on your personal time, that's cool. If mom and dad want to get it for you, that's their business. But I had an issue with like taxpayer money being spent on that because
Mm-hmm.
when I was going to school, we had to get a permission slip to watch Schindler's List because of the graphic content dealing with the Holocaust and death and murder. Like parents had to give us permission to watch that in public school. And I, I guess what I'm asking is, when I hear on the other side where they say, "Oh, the teachers are the ones who should make the decision, and the teachers know best." I I I I
The teachers
agree
are
with that
dumb.
to yeah, I agree with that to the extent where, hey, you went to school for something, I'm not going to tell a teacher as a parent, you don't know how to do calculus or you don't know US history. But when it comes to kind of the birds and the bees and anything like that sexual, I kind of feel like that's the parents' right to at least know about it. How do you kind of feel about that whole debate?
I mean, I personally see. I'm not like asexual or anything, but I'm a very, I don't know. Sexuality has always been a very private thing to me, and I feel very weird about the openness of sex. Maybe I'm like just a Marge Simpson natural or whatever, or I'm just like a prude. But I mean, schools have been doing this stuff for a while, not just with LGBT content, but like schools, especially in very liberal areas, have been teaching kids about sex at very young ages. Um, and I understand, some of the reason why of, kids are eventually going to figure out what sex is and you want them to, be safe about it. But also, I feel like it's kind of the parents' job. And maybe they could say, oh, hey, maybe we got to have a little bit of a cultural change over generation. We got to create a culture where people learn about sex, like when they're 13 or whatever, just so, they can prevent, people getting young, like people getting STDs. It's sort of like, it's sort of like how Dare, you know, a lot of times these dare programs are handing out fentanyl tests now, which does enable the kids, but the point is, at least people are like getting like testing, their drugs for fentanyl. Because if you look at a lot of kids who overdose, a lot of people who overdose, mainly it's white kids. A lot of times it's white kids from the suburbs, white teenagers who don't know what they're doing and don't know a good drug dealer or whatever. And the same thing, I can understand why they would do that with sex, but I do think it's a very young age, and I think that's very weird. I also do think, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people who use it as a hopping point to say, oh, gay people are predators, drag queens are like coming to like rape your children or something, or it's sort of like the sports issue. There was legitimate concern about fairness that even I had, about how do we do this that's best for everyone, and I think a lot of we were in a different era then, a very different political era where you couldn't even um question, you can question anything, you know
Yeah.
and now you can't question anything from the right. I feel like the left had like extreme cultural hegemony. Now I feel like the right has extreme cultural hegemony I don't like cultural hegemony. I want a discussion generally, but you know, that's just sort of what happened. And so you couldn't question it, but now people are questioning it, and now they're going way, I think, way too far, and that they're saying that all gay people are perverts, all trans people are perverts, and I don't like that. But I mean, I don't think kids should look at porn, whether it's straight porn or gay porn. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a very prudish person.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily prudish. I mean, like
It's
to the
hard to
point of
tell these days, man. It's hard to
yeah,
keep up because prudish is relative to the current social norms, and I'm like,
exactly right. You know, now prudish can be if you're on Grinder and you're not interested in somebody because they don't have a eight pack and they're 6 feet tall and look like a Greek god or goddess or whatever.
mm-hmm,
Um, but you know, to the you know transgender issue or even drag queen issue, I
mm-hmm,
mean, it's I think you're right. I think both sides have been pushed a little bit just to like to war footing where like we're gonna die on this hill and there's no compromise and we're gonna go way out in the other direction. Because to me, up until a lot of this debate happened, the past, I don't know, let's say 6 7 years. I mean, I never like heard about these books in schools. I never heard
mm-hmm,
about this kind of, you know, really pushing a certain sexual culture over another. All I knew about drag queens or transgender was, I been to Hamburger Mary's a couple times downtown Orlando, and that was it. And that was my experience, and it wasn't something like you take your kids to. But again, I think the parental choice in these matters is huge,
mm-hmm.
because, like you said, a lot of teachers, I'm sorry, a lot of educators are just flat out dumb. And there's some weird thing where I don't get whether it's straight, gay, anywhere in between, that you're a teacher and you think you have the right to have discussions about sex or push content about sex outside of the very basics of here's what happens when you have sex, here's how to protect yourself. And so that's kind of weird to me when adults that are not the parents of these children think that they're somehow having more right to have these very important discussions with kids that are not even their own. And that doesn't matter to me if they were talking to them about Playboy magazine or whatever we want to use as like a straight example or a book or something. Um, it's just kind of gross to me. But
Let me ask a question here real quick.
sure.
This is for Marcy. So we've
Mm-hmm.
heard opposing views on genderqueer, on drag queen story time. We've heard the thought that, someone, a gay person, a trans person can be going along their life as a student and they don't have a place to go to, and that drag queen story time or gender queer is a source of inclusion or somewhere they can go to feel safe. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think that genderqueer would genderqueer have helped you growing up?
I've never really read genderqueer, but I've gotten bad vibes from what some people have said. I don't know. If it depicts sex, I don't know. I feel icky about that. It's like sort of like that. I remember I have friends who learned what a blowjob was from Hank Green's book. It was in there, and
Right.
it was like a young adult book, and they were always. I mean, I knew a girl who was kind of traumatized by that, and it, like sort of took away her innocence. And I'm gonna say that
Okay.
was a straight book, but yeah, I just don't, I think we should keep kids innocent. I do think though there is, uh, you know, I'm gonna be a little woke here. There is a little point to some wokeness with regard to stuff with sort of the LGBT stuff in schools of like there is a still a huge bullying problem for LGBT students. I I remember being very afraid to be out in my high school. And I mean, I remember in high school people using words like FAG or the T slur or whatever, and it's all you know. And I do think we need to like there is a high, LGBT youth suicide rate because when you're a scared gay kid and you're in a very small homophobic town, it can be kind of hard. And, that high school may be all you know. And so I think it is important to foster a sort of environment of, hey, everyone's welcome here. And, as much as the woke, everyone's welcome here, pink triangle on the door stuff from on school counselors might be cringe. It might be helping some kids who are nervous, and so that's probably good. But yeah.
Yeah, I think you make a good point in the sense that if you look at something happened in the 90s to somebody like I believe Matthew Shepard was his name, that to me just breaks my heart. I mean, this kid, you know the kind of bravery to be who you want to be and own it, especially in that kind of climate at that time period, is enough of a challenge. And then to have people literally wanting to close down swimming pools because they thought they'd get AIDS if he swam in there. I mean, that's just nasty,
Yeah.
mean stuff. On the other hand, you know, at least in public schools in Florida, from when I went there, uh, from when I can remember, middle school to high school, teachers were not supposed to have any type of political or social displays in the classroom. That included they couldn't put a little sticker on their computer that said they were part of the teachers union. They couldn't put a bumper sticker on their computer or a sign in their classroom that said I'm for Obama or for John Kerry or for Bush or for McCain Palin. It was just kind of like, hey, we're here to teach, let it go. Um,
Mhm.
but I can see in 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 instances where for kids who might not have the support at home to at least see something to be like, hey, I exist. At least somebody knows that there's somebody like me. Um, but I think you're right. We're just at a time right now where it just goes way too far in so many directions. And then that all happens because we're not having discussions right now. Are we yelling and screaming at each other? No. We're just having a good, honest discussion about the human condition. And life is tough. It sucks. I don't know why people want to make it harder on each other. But that's where we are. So, all right, we'll get to a fun part because we've talked about politics and all other matters of
Politics is
things.
fun.
Politics is fun, I would agree, but for anybody listening, watching that maybe wants to know a little bit more, everyone can do their own little segment on this. So, Ben, we'll start with you. Um, Hit me up with favorite music, favorite movie, favorite book, favorite television show.
You put me on the spot, Jacob. You know me. I'm not so TV savvy as I used to be. Not like you. As a matter of fact, the only time I really get any TV watching in is when you are around, bud. You make me sit down and watch stuff, which I like doing. I'm just not big on watching stuff by myself. As far as music goes, I always go on the heavier end. I grew up in Ocala, Florida. I have to represent the hardcore music industry. I'm an A Day to Remember fan. I don't know what it is about A Day to Remember. It's the heavy music, but then it's also the melodic sounds that you get. So A Day to Remember, TV show, Dragon Ball Z. I still watch Dragon Ball Z every single day on ToonamiAftermath.com. That's the only thing I watch. What else did you ask? Favorite movie will always be Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, as is a popular favorite on the War Boy Studios. Many of us hosts love Hunter S. Thompson and Fear and Loathing. Was there anything else to your question?
Book.
Book. Huh. Favorite book. Stones Rule. Stones Rules
All
is my
right,
favorite book.
jeez. All right, there we go. All right, Marcy, your turn.
Okay. I would say my favorite book is Elena Ferrante's Le Mica Geniale. Not to sound fucking pretentious, but like it's actually so good. It's called the English translation is My Brilliant Friend. It's like these four books that like obviously I would say the first is my favorite. That like so it starts off with this girl. She not only disappears, but she destroys every trace of her existence. Right? That's what it starts off like telling about this girl Lila, and then it walks through the narrator, the main character, and Lila, and like their whole life, like from birth to like death, like their entire life, like bit by bit. It's like, I mean, it's like 400 pages, 400 pages books, and it's just like it's like it's more than just a Bill Jones roman. It's like a freaking Roman Flueve. It's so like deep and like thick, and it's like there's all this drama, and it's like it also shows like a lot of like the sort of more intimate parts of friendship, of like all the nuances of like how you can love someone and still have resentment towards them. And so you sort of see that, and the relationships of the characters are so complicated. It's so good. I love it. My favorite show is because I'm a Catholic, and I it's The Sopranos. Like I'm sorry, it's just The Sopranos. It's so good, and it's just the best. Yeah, my
All right.
favorite movie, or I guess it's my favorite movie right now. It's not the best movie. It's my favorite right now. I'm watching. I keep rewatching this film called Hardcore. It's a film where it's like this girl is like kidnapped and indoctrinated into this sex cult, and her like father has to save her. It's a neo-noir film. It's very dark, but her getting raped is actually sort of symbolic for like cultural decline in America. It's super interesting. It's like a really interesting cultural commentary about, I don't want to spoil it too much. Also,
Okay.
honorable mention is Euphoria. That might actually beat out The Sopranos. I don't know. I have a soft spot for Hunter Schafer. I'm actually mentioned on her Wikipedia page, which is super cool. But um, yeah, and then my favorite music right now, 100 Gex Frog on the Floor is what I'm like listening to right now. It's like the song.
Yes, that's good.
It's a good song, right? It's good. I love that.
Yes.
All
Um,
right.
my favorite artist would be
Uh,
like, but yeah.
yeah. Okay. So I'll start with favorite book. It's actually a young adult series I read in high school uh, by Scott Westerfield, Uglies, Pretties, and Specials, and it talks about kind of what you mentioned with bioethics, where it's this society where when you turn 18, you basically get to, like on an app, let's say, get to make yourself pretty. Like you get to decide what you don't like about yourself, what's wrong with you, and then you become the perfect version of what you want to be. So once you turn 18, you go through that process, then you go get to live in another part of town where everyone is just pretty and awesome and life is amazing and there are no imperfections and there's nothing wrong with anybody. And then you have another group of people, special people who might have special abilities, powers, or whatever. And the series follows this girl, Tally Youngblood, who has known and grown up with her best friend, who she's in love with, and he's, I think, about a year older than she is. So he gets to become pretty before her. And so she spends that whole year just waiting and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get to become pretty and go see my best friend and somebody I want to live life with and love. But then she kind of starts seeing the dark underbelly of what's going on in that society and decides not to go through with the treatment to become the perfect self, and then becomes an ugly and an outcast, and then eventually discovers she has special abilities and kind of revolts against the whole system with these outcasts. Um, I just like that for so many reasons. Favorite movie, I'm a dork. Jurassic Park, Titanic, probably number two. I could watch that on repeat all the time. Um, music, I'm a sad boy, so Bright Eyes, Death Cab for Cutie, anything like that. I just love kind of that indie sad music because it's so visceral. It explains so many problems that everyone has, but it does it sometimes in a dark way, a lot of times in a happy way, but you still feel sad. I don't know why. But I like that. What's the other one? So I got books, films, oh, TV show.
Shows.
Um,
Here we go.
TV show. I could watch Sons of Anarchy on repeat all the time. That's an easy one. True Blood, probably second. That was high school for me. And you know what? You know what I actually recently watched, and I've
Hmm.
watched now 3 times over. The Crown, about
I
Princess
watched
Diana
that. Yeah, I
and
watched
Charles. That
most
that
of
al-
that.
that alone for that.
Last year's arc is interesting.
Really? Okay. I'll take that. The reason I mean I love The Crown for so many reasons, but whatever that freaking intro song, the it's just such a whoever made that's good. Oh, also Game of Thrones, but
Yeah, I was waiting for Game of Thrones.
I will say I did read the books beforehand, so I'm not late to the party on that one. All right, so we'll just kind of go ahead and wrap it up. We're actually doing pretty good.
Yeah, we did
Um,
great. Yeah, thank you.
so Ben, start
Yes.
with you. How do people follow you on the social medias and anything else like that? Let them
You can
know.
find me pretty much on most platforms at Data Battle Z. I am extraordinarily shadow banned, even on X. Even though I pay a monthly subscription, it is still crickets anytime I post something.
Like,
So I would appreciate it if you followed at Data Battle Z. Thank you, folks, so much.
that's.
All right, Marcy, what about you, my dear?
I'm sorry you're shadow banned. That sucks.
It's okay. Thank you. I do it to myself.
We all do. Um, at Marcy Rheintgen on all platforms, including Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. I also have a YouTube. And also I also have a blue. I know this is weird to mention you guys. I also have a Blue Sky, but it's only 1,000 followers. I don't really post on it, but still follow me if you all want to. At Marcy Rheintgen, MarcyRheintgen, RheintGen. It's not two Rankins. It's just Marcy Rheintgen, but I just want to spell it out because it's hard to spell. And obviously, please link that in the thing below. At Marcy
Yes,
Rheintgen on everything. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. It's funny you say that because I have my last name's a little simpler, but geez, growing up in Florida, Jacob Engels. And then people would say, Jacob Ingles? No, no, no. Jacob Engels. Oh, Jacob Angels. No, no, no. Jacob Engels. Engels. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's where you can find me on X. I don't know, Ben. I'm bad. I don't really have anywhere else right
That's yeah.
now.
Not right
Well,
now.
or Gab or Truth Social. It's all the same,
Right.
really. But the shadow banning is just outrageous.
It's out of control.
Before I got banned on Twitter 8 years, this 7 or 8 years ago now, I was getting 20, 30 million impressions a month,
Yeah. I mean,
and
Musk acquiring X and doing what he did to it, I mean, you have to pay for every one of your posts to be promoted if you want anyone to see anything, at least if you're not us. I'm not sure. I see these groypers, I see all these other people, they're doing amazingly. Maybe they're just using their parents' credit cards. I have no idea. I can't make sense of it.
more than likely, and it's kind of maybe Marcy, you have something to say on this before we wrap up, but the clickiness on X and I would guess most social media is so insane where I could say something or I could write an article and be the first person to say or to write a tweet or a post on X or to write an article, and then I get a little bit of traction. But then somebody like a Benny Johnson or so and so will literally steal your content,
Mhm.
word for word, put it up, have 30 million views, and tell the world how wonderful they are. And it's like, okay, guys, I guess you're all in a club and I'm just not in it.
Mm.
But it's kind of aggravating. Do you see that on in the
Oh yeah, I
LGBT?
mean, it's becoming slop tent. You know, as much as I like, there are certain things that I don't like when people get banned generally, and I'm glad that happens less now. One thing about Elon Musk's sort of Twitter now is it kind of is worse.
Yeah,
Like the
I
content is
agree.
worse. It's sort of
Well,
becoming sort of boomery. Like,
It's like, okay, so things were really bad probably 2 or 3 years ago when it was kind of peak left Twitter because we would get banned, kind of like what you're talking about. Like people could just mass report us for literally nothing. I was actually banned for 3 years for being slightly critical to AOC, and now it's just the complete opposite direction. Now it's like right wing Twitter, and I don't like it either. I'm sorry. Might
yeah.
be an
yeah.
unpopular opinion.
What what
I
is what is what's your experience been on Blue Sky? Because I've heard
I
of it, I've never tried it, Marcy.
I
It's
probably would. Oh, sorry.
it's sort of I honestly I got 1,000 followers, and then I thought about it, and it's like if I'm if I want to do trans activism, it's mainly just far like left people on Blue Sky, and so I'm not gonna just be politically successful and like the same way like if I wanted to like evangelize, I wouldn't go into the Catholic Church and be like, you guys should convert to Catholicism.
Yeah.
Like that's not where I would go, and you know, I feel like I realized it'd be more effective on Twitter, even though I have like on Twitter I've had like turfs like posting pictures of my family and stuff, which isn't fun. I think it's worth it to hopefully make a little bit of a change. I think there's a lot of groypers. I've been having a lot of groypers say would, or like say I'm hot. So hopefully that'll make a change and they won't be racist and transphobic. But
Yeah.
I love it. All right, boys and girls, I gotta bounce. So we had a great discussion. Thank you everybody
yeah,
for watching. Marcy Rheintgen, Ben Frisbee Data Battle Z on the War Boys Network. Been another amazing show for postmodern politics. If anyone watching has a guest or a topic that they would like to discuss next week, the door is always open. Send a DM to me or Ben, and we'll get it settled. Nothing is out of the realm of possibilities if we can just have a conversation. Thank you, everyone, and let's all reconnect sometime soon, okay?
okay. Have a
We'll see
great
you
day.
next week.